There's a pervasive myth in software development circles that it's easy to subscribe to, but is just wrong. Or at least it isn't what most people think. It's the marketing ploy used by employers and recruiters, but it's a good marketing because as software developers it plays nicely to our egos, the idea of the rockstar programmer. So what makes a rockstar? Truth and myth. And how can we do better? Hi, I'm Dave Farley of Continuous Delivery. Welcome to my channel. If you haven't been here before, please do hit subscribe, and if you enjoy the content today, hit like as well. I'd like to begin by thanking our sponsors, Equal Experts, Octopus, Tricentis and Transfig. They support our channel, so please do support them in turn by checking out their links in the description below. We've just released a new how-to guide for members of our email list. The new guide is on the topic of how to organise software development teams. If you're a member of our mail list, I hope that you enjoy it. And if you aren't already, then do sign up and you can download a new copy of the guide. We publish guides like this from time to time. We publish information on upcoming YouTube videos, discounts on training courses and lots of other stuff. This is the best way to keep up to date with our stuff, and please do check the link in the description below. Let's begin this episode with the obvious. Some people are better than others at software development. This is inevitably true. This is, after all, a human activity. So there is a normal distribution of skills, experience, and, let's be honest, talent. There's a very big gap between the extreme ends of the curve. There are people who can't write a for loop in their current programming language without the assistance of their IDE, and there are people that can build world-class software in complex problem domains that's nice and easy to work on, faster than seems at all reasonable. There is certainly more than a 10x gap between those two extremes. But the great people didn't get there fully formed, and the less great people may be either in the wrong job, working in a broken process, or maybe just starting out and haven't found their way yet. The vast majority of us are really somewhere in the middle. Few of us may like to think of it like that, but rather like drivers, when asked, nearly everyone thinks that they're above average, but by definition only half of us can be. As developers, we all like to think of ourselves as smart. I think it's part of our self-image, if you can sensibly talk about self-image for such a large and disparate group. This human propensity of us all to think that we're a bit smarter than we really are is what recruiters and employers exploit when they start talking about rockstar programmers. They appeal to our vanity to make us want to work there. It's rather ludicrous, really. The lifestyles are not really that closely related between rock stars and programmers after all. We may share certain tendencies toward late nights and substance abuse, but they're different kinds of nights and different kinds of substance on the whole. But let's take this a bit more seriously. I think that what most of us have in mind when a recruiter talks about rock stars is that other well-known meme, the 10x programmer. Someone that can create better code faster than other people and who can solve problems that other people can't. I quite like this from Scott Hanselman's blog post on this topic. It's kind of a joke and kind of accurate at the same time. But there is another aspect to the myth of real rock stars that's also often seems to be applicable. Live fast, die young, and leave a lot of collateral damage. One of the other takes on the rockstar programmers is that they are the hero. They're the person who fixes the hard problems, who saves the release by finishing more features than other people could, or finding an answer to a tricky bug that no one else could fix. This is all very nice, if true, but it often isn't, and it's often inches away from some really quite nasty messes. I have worked on teams with people like that, and it's great in the right context. I've also worked on the teams where people sort out the drama and even once or twice created it so that they could look like heroes. I've seen people who saw themselves as rock stars and cut corners to make the release so that they'd look good, but as a result they also left such a mess in the code that it took the rest of us weeks to recover from. Obviously this is not good. This is the programmer equivalent of throwing the TV into the swimming pool at the hotel. This is one of several problems that I have with the idea of Rockstar programmers. I think that it's a terrible idea to plant as an aspiration into people's heads. None of the people that I've ever worked with or met that I think of as great, sometimes world-class programmers, think of themselves as rock stars. Most of them certainly knew that they were good, but that's not the same thing at all. None of the people that I have met that appear to think of themselves as rock stars have been any good as far as I've been able to tell. Yet these are the people that the lazy recruiters and employers want to find. I've been lucky to work with a few people that were genuinely great in my opinion, at the top end of the bell curve. And I've seen others that may have been smarter, or at least they certainly thought they were, but weren't as much value to the team or ultimately to the companies that employed them. This isn't about how smart we are, though that plays a role. It also matters how people work and how they add value to the team. And that leads to the second objection, and probably, if I'm honest, my main one, that I have with the idea of the Rockstar programmer. Professional software development is mostly a team sport. You can certainly have rockstar teams, maybe they're rock bands, but the great teams are greater than the sum of their parts. It's not about individual performance, it's about how it all comes together in the end. I have in mind here some personal experience. I worked on a world-class team. That's not me saying that others said that about the team. It was they were widely recognised for their excellence. The team was fantastic, but it wasn't packed full of geniuses. We were all very good, but I thought of us as a bunch of very good developers with world-class habits, rather than programming rock stars. At a different time in my career, I worked in a different organisation. I think that if I am honest, the average talent, whatever that may mean, the raw smartness perhaps of the people on this other team may have been higher. They did very good work, but it was less innovative, developed more slowly and had more bugs. They weren't in the same league as the first team. So there are at least two dimensions to this. There is the talent of the individuals and the quality of their approach to the work. The first team, in my example, were a world-class team because of the combination of the people and their approach. The second was a team of very talented individuals, but working in ways that limited the impact of their talents. This isn't an easy relationship to unpick. The problem is that at the extremes, great people can make almost any situation work, mainly because if the approach gets in the way, they'll subvert it in order to make progress. But ultimately, a good person will always be stopped by a bad process if it's bad enough. I was once working with a client and pairing with one of their senior developers. At some point, I said, we can generalize this and make the code a lot simpler if we add a new class here. He winced and said, okay, but was obviously reluctant to add the class. I assumed that he didn't like the design that I was suggesting, which is exactly the kind of conversation that you want to have with your pair. So I asked him to explain, but that wasn't his problem. It turned out that it took 7 steps to add a new class to this code base, including adding references to the class in some random YAML files, and even filling in a form so that the class could be added to their version control system. Don't even ask me, I have no idea how they ended up in this position. This chap probably wasn't a rock star, but he was a very good programmer, capable, who was actively prevented from making design choices that would make his life and the code better. At the other end of the performance spectrum, poor performers will struggle to make progress, perhaps whatever the process. The usual approach to solving this problem is to micromanage the work of the poor performers. Often this is institutionalized into the requirements process and the commit process. Developers being told in specific detail the design of the solution to implement. something that I call programming by remote control, and then being prevented from committing changes until approved by a more senior colleague. Both of these are a failure of trust, maybe justified, maybe not, but either way, you don't really fix these kinds of trust problems by being more bureaucratic. You fix them by making the people you don't trust more trustworthy. This gets back once again to how people work and the culture that they work in. Now, all this talk of bell curves and top-end performers and low-end performers sounds a bit old school, a bit draconian, but I'm just trying to be honest, and I have seen both, that there is a range of capability. I confess I perceive a tension here between two ideas, both of which to some degree I subscribe to, but that ultimately are in conflict. On the one hand, the people involved make a difference. Some people are able to make better progress than others. They can find the simple in complex problems and even find ways to eliminate the complexity sometimes. On the other hand, I believe that the biggest barrier to progress isn't that people lack skill or are lazy or don't know what they're doing. It's that they work in ways that stop them exercising their skill, that prevents them from working efficiently and hides the context of their work from them. So it's hard for them to understand why they're doing what they're doing. This is the stuff that stops great people making progress. So it gets in the way for the rest of us too. Despite sitting on the fence, what I am sure of is that the unit of effectiveness in professional software development is the team, not the individual. So we want good people, but even more than that, we want good teams. A few years ago, Google did some research. It was called Project Aristotle. They wanted to understand what made a great team. I'm pretty sure that they started out assuming that they would find an ideal mix of highly talented types of people necessary to build great teams. That's how most organisations think of this kind of problem and the roots of the Rockstar idea, really. But what they actually found was a repeat of research done 40 years earlier by Meredith Belbin. Belbin did research into teams too, also looking for what made great teams. He found that if you make a team only of rock stars, you end up with what he called an Apollo team, who end up spending a lot of time engaged in abortive debate. In Belbin's words, the lack of coherent teamwork nullified the gains of individual effort or brilliance. So teams made up only of rock stars dissipate their advantage of their smartness. High-performing teams in the Belbin model were made up of a mix of different types of people, all of them important. Belbin came up with a model of 9 roles that are necessary for effective teams. I'm not going to explore these in detail, but here are a couple of examples just so you can understand what I'm talking about. A team worker helps the team to gel, using their versatility to identify the work required and complete it on behalf of the team. Their strengths are that they're cooperative, perceptive and diplomatic. They listen and avert friction. Their allowable weaknesses are that they could be indecisive in crunch situations and tend to avoid confrontation. Don't be surprised to find that they might be a little hesitant to make unpopular decisions. Now compare that to another of Belbin's role types, the plant, who tends to be highly creative, good at solving problems in unconventional ways. Their strengths are creative, imaginative, free thinking, generates ideas and solve difficult problems. Their allowable weaknesses are that they might ignore incidentals and may be too preoccupied to really communicate effectively. Don't be surprised to find that they could also be a bit absent-minded or forgetful. People are usually a combination of these 9 different roles to different degrees. I'm pretty strongly a plant and not great as a completer finisher, for example. A quick sidebar, this isn't about recognising your weaknesses and working to strengthen them, rather the reverse. It's about recognising your strengths and maximising them and working with other people who can cover your weaknesses while you cover theirs. This is what great teams do. So a great team has a good mix of all of these roles represented. Google spent 2 years studying 180 teams and their findings mirrored Belbin's in many ways. But they also found some other interesting things too. They identified 5 traits in teams that indicated high performance. Dependability, work is done on time and to a high standard. Structure and clarity, the team and each member of it understand their role and how it fits into the bigger picture. People understand what they need to do and why they're doing it. Meaning, team members' work is important to them. Gallup found that employees who use their strengths every day are 6 times more likely to be engaged in their work. Playing to our strengths allows us to take ownership of our work. Impact. Team members believe that what they're working on matters in a broader context of some kind. And last, psychological safety. The degree to which team members trust each other and are prepared to take risks. Are you happy to point out that the boss's idea is wrong? Or suggest trying something radical just to see if it works? These things require trust that your ideas won't be dismissed or you blamed. And according to Google, psychological safety is one of the key predictors of great team performance. The researchers at Google wrote this: who's on the team matters less than how the team members interact, structure their work, and view their contributions. One final example of the impact that culture and approach have is one of my favourite stories from Netflix. At the height of their early success, when Netflix was one of the fastest growing companies ever, Adrian Cockcroft, who was the CTO at the time, was often asked by his envious Silicon Valley colleagues where he managed to get all the great engineers from, when they were finding it so difficult to recruit these rock stars. He used to reply, "We got them from you, and then we got out of their way." If you really care about doing a great job and you are always the smartest person in the room, rather than buying sunglasses and Jack Daniels, I suggest you find a better room. Thank you very much for watching.